Son de esas cosas que yo no llegué como
diversity of species are, and it's something that's usually really important for studies of all sorts. Usually the way we assess populations in the wild, at least in the tropics, is usually transect-based. And we usually use visual sightings to try and determine what the size of populations are, what the diversity of species are. We then process this information using various methods, one observing and one recording the information. And these are conclusions for us to take home. What are the implications of this type of work for many of the studies that have been done and that we're going to do? And what are the implications for wildlife management plans? Thank you.
Bonjour. Ça va? I slightly changed the title, as you might notice, because that turned out to be more applicable to what I actually got ready as a talk. First, I want to point out that the work I'm going to present here is not just mine, it's also the work of Joe Bright and Marco Visser. And there are a lot of people involved, mostly students. This is not even a complete list. Like James Bullock, I had these two. Like him, I wasn't lying in the grass myself. Recruitment, so the area below this dashed curve, is very much reduced. You see this big surface here for the good dispersal, and the tiny one here for the reduced dispersal. So Janssen is predicting a huge impact of reduced dispersal. There's still huge animals, and they would really readily swallow those fleshy fruits. The largest mammals exist seeds. Fruits. And it also had, the species both have host-specific seed predators. In this case, it's the burkey beetle. They take seeds, they collect them as food reserves. One by one, they...
Ecuador for my PhD, where I studied seed dispersal of neotropical palm in a hunted forest and a non-hunted forest. And in that system, toucans were the main dispersers. And then I will finish up by telling you about a new project where we are tracking hornbills, Ceratogena hornbills shown there, in Cameroonian forest and looking at the long distance movements of these birds. There's a trough in both abundance and fruit availability, and this corresponds to a pretty major low amount of fruit available and also very low abundances of hornbills. And then those, so our next plan is to use remote sense GIS data to investigate the potential impacts of habitat conversion and fragmentation on the hornbill movements in Cameroon. And then we'd like to develop distribution models that use rainfall, vegetation cover, and fruit production to help us predict important habitat, hornbill habitat. Martin Mikulski is one of our collaborators, Tom Deach, and Tony Chaser, who has actually done a lot of the bird trapping after my initial trip to Cameroon. We have a big field crew in Compia that are helping us find nest and trapping sites. And we have several funding agencies I'd like to thank. Also want to thank Pedro for giving me the freedom to pursue this project. And that's it, and thank you.
The academic committee know how much work he did and how much he showed it by himself. And so this is a larger forest block extending into a large gorge, and birds also use fragmented forests and obviously also sites in the agricultural landscape, isolated trees and farmsteads. So the question really is, how does the movement behavior and the seed dispersal of those
joint effort also in terms of conservation to look at frugivores, how they react to fragmentation, degradation, and what we could do potentially to get all our resources together for also some management and conservation effort. Green, these ficus species are, at least in this area, mainly dispersed by bats, so they play a major role in this dispersal of these keystone species that are also important for a lot of other frugivores and also seed predators. At least in this case here of the fruit-eating bats and here flying foxes, and we have the pleasure to work with colleagues in Africa on flying foxes here. Flying foxes have also a very interesting and very important contribution to seed dispersal in Africa, often also contributing to plants that are very important to the local population, and I will show you one example.
Communication by now. That's a bit of a strange thing. Inside, I think it's quite easy to understand. I think it's just. I feel nothing. We'll have to expand this a little bit. One part of this talk. This increase may go up perhaps up to even 7 degrees, which seems to be incredible. In terms of precipitation, well, the patterns are not that clear. But one thing that we may say is that, at least in the temperate regions, apparently precipitation will rather increase than decrease, contrary to Montpellier, where it will become rather much sunnier. And there's also a change in the growing season. Some are fortunate enough now to have done that over decades. But the normal thing is really that we are working quite on this left lower part of just this scale. And well, the scale that's, I think, the most important one really, when we're speaking of what is likely to happen, let's say, regarding climate change, to some bit. There are many questions.
Il faudra lui dire il y a un job machin. Cliquez sur le. Non, non. Il parle aussi anglais et tout, il n'y a pas de souci. D'ailleurs, il parle mieux que moi en anglais.
C'est comme ça que je sais que je suis dans
Par contre, vous allez avoir l'ordinateur qui est.
Oui, mais lui, ça n'a rien.
And Arndt's talk was a nice lead-in because I want to do something similar to what he did and sort of point out that really we could be doing a lot more as dispersal ecologists in this area. Individual species dispersal kernels. In this case, it's dispersal of another invasive species, Ammonia glabra, pond apple, through cassowaries, and we get some idea of how far these animals are moving. This is a many just thought about dispersal as being water dispersed. So they'd start at the top of the catchment and manage down. We were able to show the relationships between each of our two ecological scales, that's maturation rate, dispersal scale relationship here, and rate of maturation of individual plants are the critical ecological processes. Another is that it's a great opportunity to test all sorts of theories and ideas that is almost completely absent from most management programs. And modelling is really the way to go about doing it. So thank you very much.
Well, basically work in the Pan Amazon, and there's a wonderful geomorphological gradient that matches on to the productivity of this region. Thick husks, and so thick exocarps and indehiscent.
You have a small bird, right? But they were gone. So these are reduction and shrinkage of 7 times in body mass and 2.5.
It's a process that we can track when we are mapping interaction tool that has 3 basic properties, 3 basic objectives. The first one is that it provides a very good way, a very robust way to visualize the complexity of interactions that can occur in those local mega-diversified cover in nature. So that we need this roadmap to try
these novel interactions in Singapore. One Ted will be interested in, we have Piperoduncum, spread by in fact the same species, Montingia calabura, and this is true throughout Southeast Asia, and it's true throughout the world, as we've seen. Wild spider monkeys, for instance, are more likely to sniff a fruit which doesn't change colour. This is a sniffing index with spider monkeys. These are fruits that don't change colour, and they sniff them a lot. Fruits that do.
And if you are interested in knowing this strain, Pierce, Burnett, Wells, and their colleagues have a good record if you check those papers.